Penguin Random House Audio presents the Unwinding Anxiety Workbook. Practical exercises to break the cycles of worry and fear to heal your mind. This is the author, Judson Brewer, MD, PhD. To my wife, Mari, who has taught me so much over the years. Introduction. I have scienced the shit out of anxiety. As a behavioral neuroscientist, I have dedicated decades of research to understanding why habits form and how we can break free of them. As a psychiatrist, I have tested and tweaked tools to help people implement meaningful change in their lives. As a person, I've had my own share of anxiety, ranging from anxiety-driven, body-exploding, irritable bowel syndrome to full-blown panic attacks. And this isn't to say that I'm now anxiety-free. I still have anxiety show up for me on a regular basis. But I now know how to manage my anxiety, to relate to it differently. And this has made all the difference. A word of warning. If you are hoping this workbook or my Unwinding Anxiety book, or for that matter, any other book, is going to rid you of anxiety, unfortunately, you will invariably be disappointed. This isn't how anxiety or our brain works. We have no anxiety switch that can be flipped off. Oh, how we all wish there were such a thing. The good news is that once you learn how and why anxiety shows up and how you might inadvertently be stoking it, you can learn how to manage it when it appears and not feed it so it doesn't last as long or show up as often. I wrote this workbook to serve as a companion for Unwinding Anxiety, the book I published in 2021. Unwinding Anxiety spells out all the details, the science, and the methods for breaking free from anxiety habit loops. Think of this workbook as your trusty mule, or if you are a Star Wars fan, your R2-D2 sidekick. It will help you carry the load on your journey into wisdom. Reading or listening to a book, understanding concepts, doesn't get you very far. Wisdom comes only from experience. You have to do the work. Put the concepts into practice in order to develop wisdom. How to use this workbook, putting knowledge into practice. The chapters in this workbook parallel those in Unwinding Anxiety. If you're listening to Unwinding Anxiety, you can listen to a chapter, reflect on the chapter, and then listen to the corresponding spot in this audiobook to work through your thoughts in the spirit of that chapter. I'll summarize the main points of each chapter in Unwinding Anxiety, followed by suggested tips and tools that you can use to put these concepts into practice in your everyday life. There are many prompts and questions in this book that can help you journal through your anxiety. If you like to journal, grab yourself a journal and journal away. But don't get caught in the trap of thinking that just because you have an insight and write it down, this will magically change your life. You have to put those insights into practice. You have to test them out to see which nuggets are truly golden and which are fool's gold, promising you an end to suffering but not delivering, leaving you looking for more. Ready to get started? Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Anxiety Goes Viral. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, anxiety rates have skyrocketed, with a 3.9% increase in reported psychological distress since 2018. As we acknowledge this rise in anxious feelings, it's important to recognize that anxiety can manifest itself in incredibly diverse and often sneaky ways. It's a shapeshifter, showing up not just in the form of worry or fear, but sometimes as physical symptoms, as avoidance behaviors, and even in the subtleties of everyday decisions and reactions. In college, my anxiety manifested itself as irritable bowel syndrome. For others, it ranges from constant worry to full-blown panic attacks. Remember, anxiety is defined as a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. It's important to be able to see and feel the difference between the feeling of worry and the mental behavior of worrying. We'll get into this more in subsequent chapters, but make sure you bookmark this in your brain right now. A feeling is not a behavior. Exercise 1. How do you distinguish feelings from behaviors? A feeling is a subjective experience or emotional state. while a mental behavior is an action that stems from one's thoughts, feelings, or internal and external prompts. For example, anxiety is a feeling, while worrying and procrastinating are behaviors. If you'd like, take a moment to write down different feelings and mental behaviors. Anxiety is so pervasive that we often overlook its impact because it's not as visible or as straightforward as other conditions. It can be quietly woven into the fabric of our lives, showing up in our drive to succeed, in the care we take in avoiding certain foods or situations, or even in the intensity with which we pursue our hobbies and interests. The ability to see and acknowledge the various forms of anxiety is a powerful first step in addressing them. Recognizing these patterns allows us to approach them with curiosity and kindness, to better understand their origins and the ways they influence our behavior. Anxiety is not always the enemy. It can be a misguided attempt by our brains to protect us or to propel us forward. But when it becomes a habit loop that reinforces itself, like eating to manage anxiety, only to feel worse afterwards, it's essential to step back and reevaluate its role in our lives. How we react to anxiety also demonstrates the importance of self-compassion. We need to understand our history with anxiety and our responses to it, and learn how to navigate it without judgment. This approach isn't about eradicating anxiety. Instead, it's about changing our relationship with it, and in doing so, allowing ourselves to live more fully and with greater ease. Exercise 2. How does anxiety show up for you? Take a moment to reflect on these questions or write your answers down in a journal. Is anxiety in your body? What does it feel like? Where do you feel it? Is anxiety in your mind? What thoughts come up? What else do you notice? Exercise 3. How often does anxiety show up in your life? Here's a list to choose from. It's always there. Mornings, afternoons, night, just before sleep, daily, 2 to 3 times a week, once a week. Reflect on how often you have felt anxious in the past month, in the past 6 months, in the past year, now compared to 5 years ago. Chapter 2. The Birth of Anxiety. The key formula to remember for this chapter is fear plus uncertainty equals anxiety. Fear, our oldest survival tool, serves a simple purpose. It teaches us to avoid danger in the future through a mechanism known as negative reinforcement. Imagine walking into a street, almost being hit by a car, and then rushing to safety. That's fear, instant and educational. It teaches us to look both ways before crossing streets, just as our ancestors learned to avoid predators. Our evolutionary journey as humans introduced a new layer on top of our old survival brain, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC for short, which is involved in planning and creativity. The PFC predicts the future based on the past, but it needs accurate information to make these predictions. In the absence of such data, it improvises, running simulations to help us choose the best path forward or street to cross. This is where anxiety comes in. Anxiety is born when our PFC lacks the necessary data to predict the future accurately. Without credible information, our brains often craft fear-based narratives. After all, it's better to be safe than sorry. And unfortunately, our brains remember and amplify the most shocking news, adding to our sense of danger. So while fear provides us with an adaptive learning mechanism meant to keep us safe, anxiety, conversely, is our overthinking brain spinning out of control due to insufficient information. The fear response is swift. Anxiety, however, builds over time. Immediate survival reactions, such as jumping back onto the sidewalk to avoid an oncoming car, are instinctual and rapid. The learning that follows, like looking both ways before crossing, is quick and experiential. This is when your PFC is useful, helping you learn and eventually plan based on your experiences. When it comes to anxiety, your PFC can go a bit off the rails, creating worry and concern over
Sample complete. Ready to continue?